Before we dive in today, did you know that there are over 50 full-length bonus episodes waiting for you on Patreon? Well, if you didn't, now you do. This month alone, I covered the Crestview family murders, which is a shocking Florida death penalty case that just ended earlier this year. Last month, I unpacked Alabama's Sarah Starr murder-for-hire case. And did you know that there was a chilling Offutt Air Force Base case where a wannabe serial killer detailed his plan to kill and then followed through with it? If you're craving more, head to patreon.com/militarymurder or tap the link in the show notes. All right, True Crime Army, let's get into today's episode.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, veteran and former active duty JAG, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. Because let's be honest, we all want to be in the know when crimes occur among our community. If you're new here, yay, and once you hear this episode, I have a feeling that you'll want to stick around. Just a quick heads up, I usually deep dive into one case per episode, but in these headline episodes, I bring you rapid-fire updates on 4 to 6 of the most shocking, tragic, or underreported stories happening right now in our military and veteran circles. Before we get into it, a little housekeeping. Be sure to follow the show wherever you're listening so that you never miss a drop. And if you're enjoying what you hear, rating the show 5 stars helps more people discover the work that I do here. Now, I'll be honest, today's headlines episode could have easily featured 15 cases, but I've narrowed it down to 6 that I think you need to know about. And who knows, maybe I'll drop another headlines episode in a couple of weeks. And the cases on deck today are as follows. A finalized case out of Schofield Barracks, a disturbing murder from Fort Drum, and of course, Fort Hood. Or should I say, Fort Hood? Yes, that was not a mistake. Well, of course, Fort Hood makes another grim appearance. I've also got an international case out of Australia, a cold case solved with Air Force ties, and a naval officer under fire for suspicious death in Japan. Now, let's dig in.
Military Murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
When 19-year-old Mischa Johnson moved from the United States mainland to Hawaii with her new husband, 29-year-old Private First Class Dewayne Arthur Johnson II, not to be confused with Dewayne Johnson, The Rock, well, she likely imagined paradise, a tropical duty station, and the start of a new family. Those dreams, however, ended in unspeakable violence on July 12, 2024. That day, at their home near Schofield Barracks in Oahu, an argument between the young couple spiraled into a nightmare. In a military courtroom, Private First Class Johnson later confessed in stark detail to what he did. During a heated fight, he grabbed a machete, yes, a machete, and struck Mischa in the head, lodging the blade in her skull. Mischa, who was 5 months pregnant with their unborn daughter, was killed by that single blow. But the horror didn't end there. Unable to dislodge the machete at first, Johnson later retrieved the weapon and, in a gruesome attempt to hide the crime, he dismembered his wife's body, first using the machete, then buying a power saw to finish the job. He severed Mischa's arms and legs, stuffed her remains into trash bags, and then disposed of them in a dumpster on base, believing that they would be incinerated and that his crime would be erased. For weeks, Mischa was simply listed as a missing person, and all the while, Johnson went about his life as if nothing had happened. But investigators grew suspicious. According to Army CID agents, Johnson's behavior after the murder was disturbingly nonchalant. They discovered that in the days following Mischa's disappearance, Johnson had been messaging 18 different women on a dating app. Yes, 18, that's 18, and he was already in an open relationship with another woman. Images on his phone showed him cozy with his girlfriend, and digital records revealed that they were planning to start a new life together, talking about marriage, kids, and their future, even as Mischa's case was still listed as missing. When the truth finally came out, it rocked the military community in Hawaii. Mischa's remains were recovered, and Johnson was arrested and charged. Under a plea agreement, he pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and making false statements, charges reduced from what was originally charged as premeditated murder. On June 3, 2025, a military judge sentenced Johnson to 23 years in prison, the maximum allowed under the plea, and issued a dishonorable discharge. In court, Johnson confronted what he had done. He took the stand and apologized to Mischa's family and to his fellow soldiers. Quote, "My wife didn't deserve that. She wasn't trash," end quote, acknowledging the horror of discarding her body like garbage. Quote, "I hate myself for what I did every day," end quote. But Mischa's family made it clear his pain would never compare to their own. In a tearful victim impact statement, Mischa's mother described her grief as hell, an unbearable agony that she carries every day and every night. Mischa's sister spoke of a void that would never be filled. Mischa had been set to be her maid of honor just months later. On her first Mother's Day without her daughter, Mischa's mom called the day difficult, painful, and empty. They painted a picture of a vibrant, loving young woman who believed in her marriage, who was excited to become a mother, and who supported her husband's Army career with her entire heart. That Johnson could kill her and their unborn child in a moment of rage is something her family may never fully comprehend. The case raised questions about mental health, red flags, and military domestic violence. Johnson's defense team never offered a clear explanation. His father testified that this was completely out of character for the son that he raised in a devout Christian household. But the facts are that he had various dating profiles and a new relationship, and all of that painted a picture of a man desperately unhappy looking for a way out. Ultimately, Johnson's guilty plea spared him a possible life sentence, but 23 years behind bars sends a strong message. As the Army later emphasized, no one is above the law, even a soldier, when it comes to such a heinous act. In late October 2024, 37-year-old Jessica Jessie Arguizoni Olsen traveled with her Navy officer husband, Lt Commander Christopher Olsen, to a hotel in Fukuoka, Japan for his birthday celebration. What happened next, however, shattered two families and sparked an international murder case. In the early morning hours of October 28th, Jessie's family in New York was jolted awake by an unimaginable phone call. Something terrible had happened to Jessie overseas. They were told she was dead, but they didn't know how or why. At first, Japanese authorities treated Jessie's death as a suspected suicide, but soon inconsistencies began to emerge. And as NCIS dug deeper, suspicion fell squarely on Christopher Olsen himself. You see, Jessie was found dead inside of the hotel room on the morning of October 28th. But according to a Navy charge sheet later obtained by reporters, Jessie had likely died 2 entire days earlier, on or about October 26. The autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to her head, along with a fractured jaw and a broken hyoid bone, injuries which were consistent with strangulation. So if you're tracking on this timeline, Jessie allegedly died on the 26th, but her body wasn't discovered until the 28th. And that's because Christopher stayed in the hotel room with her body for 2 days, telling hotel staff that Jessie was sick and to leave them alone. No room service, no cleaning, no disturbance. Prosecutors allege this was an attempt to obstruct justice and cover up the crime. Back home, Jessie's family was not only grieving, they were being left in the dark. For weeks, Jessie's sister, Dominique Arguizoni, said, "Our family was treated like an afterthought. We were forced to chase answers." They described countless unreturned phone calls and emails. It took an entire month, a full month, for Jessie's body to be returned to the U.S., and even longer to receive her personal belongings. Quote, "It's like they're ripping off the Band-Aid every single time," end quote. And that was a statement by Jessie's mother. Fed up with the silence and red tape, Jesse's family finally launched the Justice for Jesse campaign to demand transparency. Meanwhile, the wheels of military justice moved slowly. Christopher Olsen was originally restricted to base at Sasebo Naval Base in Japan, but after violating those orders, he was placed in the brig, presumably pretrial confinement, though reporting on this remains unclear. In May of 2025, the Navy formally charged Olsen with unpremeditated murder and obstruction of justice. He was arraigned in San Diego but did not enter a plea, which is standard for that stage. His court-martial is scheduled for October of 2025 in Yokosuka, Japan, almost exactly 1 year after Jesse's death. If convicted, he faces up to life in prison. Jessie is remembered by her family as warm, funny, and deeply supportive. She had fallen in love with Christopher when they were college students and followed him to Japan as a loyal Navy spouse. And now her memory lives on as her family fights to ensure that her death isn't swept under the rug. You better believe that we'll be watching this court-martial closely when it unfolds in the fall. Now, let's talk about a case out of Australia. And I'll be honest, we don't hear about a lot of these. So when one hits my radar, my ears perked up. This one begins in November of 2020 on a sunny day in Queensland, Australia. 54-year-old Jacqueline Davidson headed out for a relaxing kayaking trip at Lake Samsevale with her husband, Major Graeme Davidson, a former British Army officer originally from Glasgow. But by the end of that day, Jacqueline was dead. Graeme told authorities that her kayak tipped over, and despite frantic CPR attempts by onlookers, she drowned. At the time, investigators chalked it up as a tragic accident, and after her funeral, Graeme left Australia just 5 months later and relocated to an entirely new country, Thailand. And that's when things got weird. In Thailand, Graeme quickly remarried a local woman and settled into a laid-back expat lifestyle, all the while quietly trying to claim over $1 million in life insurance from Jacqueline's policy. But as we know, secrets don't often stay buried forever. Almost 2 years later, a routine coroner's review raised some serious red flags. Witness accounts didn't add up, and expert analysis of the lake conditions suggested the drowning may have been staged. That led Queensland police to launch Operation Victor Harlow, a full-on homicide investigation. What they uncovered was damning, evidence that Graeme had planned Jacqueline's death in order to cash out on her life insurance policy, and he also wanted to start an entirely new life with his new wife in Thailand. And on May 4th, 2025, justice finally caught up with Graeme. While Graeme was back in Brisbane for a visit, police raided the home he was staying in, catching him by surprise. Footage from the arrest showed him being pulled off of a fold-out couch as officers took him into custody. He's now facing charges of domestic violence murder, fraud, and attempted fraud. Investigators allege that on November 27, 2020, the day of the so-called accident, there was some kind of argument or breakdown in this relationship, and that Graeme used the kayaking trip as a cover-up to murder his wife. Jacqueline's autopsy confirmed that she had drowned, but now police believed that she was deliberately put in the water with no real chance of survival. Queensland authorities credit their forensic expert and witness interviews, as well as relentless determination for cracking the case. Detective Acting Inspector Steve Windsor said that the case proves that, quote, not all accidents are what they seem, end quote. For Jacqueline's loved ones, this arrest was long overdue. And for the true crime world, this case shows us what happens when a carefully planned crime meets a persistent investigation. Our next case takes us to Fort Drum, New York, home of the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division. And it's here, in August of 2024, that a baffling and brutal murder unfolded. On the morning of August 5th, 2024, soldiers at Fort Drum grew concerned when 21-year-old Specialist Jacob Ashton failed to show up for formation. That concern quickly turned to devastation, because later that same day, Jacob was found dead in his car. Even more shocking, suspicion quickly fell on someone disturbingly close to him, his roommate and fellow soldier, Specialist Riley Birbilas. The two were both members of the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, and they had deployed together to Iraq in 2023. They shared not only a barracks room, but a battlefield. So what could have possibly gone so wrong? At a February 2025 military hearing, Army prosecutors laid out a horrifying chain of events. They alleged that Birbilas attacked Jacob with a hammer, striking him in the head. He also inflicted a deep cut to Jacob's thigh, possibly as Jacob tried to escape or defend himself. Then, prosecutors say that Birbilas wrapped Jacob's body in a blanket, carried it downstairs, and hid it in the back seat of Jacob's very own car. He piled luggage on top to try and conceal the body. But that plan quickly unraveled. Jacob's fellow soldiers, still concerned when he didn't show up for work, searched for him the next morning and made the grisly discovery. As of right now, the motive remains unclear. Army officials haven't disclosed what sparked the violence. Was it a fight? Was it something deeper? We don't know yet. What we do know is that Specialist Riley Birbilas, just 22 years old, was promptly charged with premeditated murder and obstruction of justice. He was placed in pretrial confinement as the military justice system began its very slow march forward. Birbilas' civilian defense attorneys have asked the public not to rush to judgment, stating that, quote, a complete and thorough investigation is nowhere near complete, end quote. In May 2025, Birbilas was arraigned at Fort Drum, where he pled not guilty to all charges. His court-martial is currently scheduled for late 2025, and if convicted of premeditated murder, Birbilas could face a mandatory life sentence. This case has left Fort Drum reeling, not only because of the violence, but because it happened between two soldiers who had once worn the same patch, fought the same fight, and shared the same space. And now, one is dead, the other may spend the rest of his life behind bars. Early on the morning of May 16, 1985, a passerby made a grim discovery in Salt Lake City, Utah, the body of 18-year-old Christine Gallegos lying in a field. Christine had been beaten, sexually assaulted, stabbed, and shot twice in the head, a level of brutality that suggested a frenzied and deeply violent attack. Police quickly learned that Christine had been hitchhiking to work the night before. She was trying to get to her job at a donut shop when she crossed paths with a killer. Despite an intensive investigation at the time, this case went cold. Decades passed, detectives pored over the case file, multiple rounds of forensic testing yielded no viable suspects, and all the while, Christine's family waited and hoped. Her mother, Leah Gallegos, never gave up. And for 40 years, she clung to the hope that one day she might know who took her daughter's life. And guess what? That day finally came. It was in 2025, exactly 40 years to the day after Christine's murder. Salt Lake City police announced that the case had finally been solved thanks to massive advances in DNA technology. You see, back in 2023, cold case investigators submitted an unknown male DNA profile taken from the original sexual assault kit, and they submitted this to Othram, a Texas lab that specializes in genetic genealogy. Othram's advanced analysis identified a likely suspect, and detectives were able to confirm the match by obtaining DNA from one of the suspect's family members. The name that came back? Ricky Lee Stallworth, a man who had never once, not once, come up in the original investigation. In 1985, Stallworth was a 27-year-old airman stationed at Hale Air Force Base, just outside Salt Lake City. He lived in Layton, Utah, not far from where Christine was killed. Crucially, police found no evidence that Christine knew him. She was likely picked up at random while hitchhiking. In other words, Christine fell prey to a stranger, a man in uniform, a man with a secret. By the time detectives finally put a name to the DNA, Stallworth was already dead. He had died of natural causes in July of 2023, just months before police would have come knocking. Quote, I wish we would have gotten to him before he died, end quote. And that was stated by retired detective Cordon Parks, expressing the cold case team's deep frustration. Still, in a press briefing held in May of 2025, authorities publicly declared with 100% certainty that Ricky Lee Stallworth was Christine's killer. And if that wasn't wild enough, investigators uncovered even more disturbing details. In the final years of his life, Stallworth had multiple police encounters involving sex workers. And get this, when detectives contacted one of his ex-wives, she reportedly said she wasn't surprised to hear that he might be connected to a murder case. What? Wow, that is so wild. For Christine's family, the DNA match was a long-awaited answer. At a press conference on May 15, 2025, exactly 40 years after Christine was murdered, her mother, Leah Gallegos, stood beside her son to speak. Choking back tears, Leah thanked the detectives who never gave up. "I sure miss this girl every day," she said, her voice trembling. She reflected on everything that was stolen from her daughter. "I wonder about the kids she would have had, and I watch other people with their daughters, their grandkids. They took so much away when they took her away." At the time of her death, Christine had been engaged to her high school sweetheart. She was in love with her fiancé, Troy, Leah shared, and they had a family planned. Salt Lake City Police Chief Brian Redd praised the relentless dedication of the homicide detectives and the power of new forensic tools. And Steve O'Camp of the Utah State Bureau of Investigation said it best. "We weren't able to arrest a suspect, but hopefully we achieved some measure of justice for her and for the family and friends that loved her." The murder of Christine Gallegos is a heartbreaking reminder of how long justice can take. But it's also a powerful example of what's possible when science, persistence, and compassion all come together. 40 years later, a nameless DNA profile became a man, and a family, after decades of silence, finally got their answer. On the evening of February 21st, 2025, police in Killeen, Texas received a troubling phone call that would lead them straight to a nightmare. John Gita Mwangi, a 42-year-old Army Staff Sergeant stationed at Fort Hood, now known as Fort Hood, had allegedly phoned his brother in a panic. Mwangi told him, quote, "Come get my children. I just shot Esther." The brother, alarmed and confused, immediately contacted the Killeen Police Department. Officers rushed to the Mwangi family's off-base home to perform a welfare check. When they arrived at around 7:15 p.m., it was two young children, the couple's own kids, who answered the door. They were confused, but physically unharmed. One of the children told officers that Daddy went to get food and that Mommy was just asleep in the bedroom. But behind that locked bedroom door, officers found a scene that would devastate not just the family, but the entire Fort Hood community. Inside, they found 37-year-old Sergeant Esther Gita dead from multiple gunshot wounds. According to the police affidavit, the bedroom was in a complete disarray. Blood spattered across the walls, and Esther's body showed signs of a violent struggle. She had been shot in the right arm and buttocks, and there were cuts to her face. Officers recovered 3 shell casings from the floor. One of the children later told investigators that they had heard arguing between their parents, followed by loud banging noises. By the time the police arrived, Mwangi had fled, but not for long. Acting quickly on the brothers' tip, police obtained an arrest warrant and that very same night located John Mwangi at Fort Hood. He was taken into custody without incident, charged with first-degree murder, and held without bond pending trial. The murder sent shockwaves through the military community because this wasn't just a soldier accused of killing his wife. Both John and Esther were active duty soldiers. Esther Gita served as a veterinary food inspection specialist in the 1st Medical Brigade, part of 3 Armored Corps. Originally from Kenya, Esther was known as a cheerful, dedicated professional, deeply respected among her peers. She and Mwangi had reportedly met through their shared Kenyan cultural community and had 2 young children together, ages 3 and 7, according to local reports. And now those children are left effectively orphaned. Their mother is gone. Their father may spend the rest of his life in prison. In the days following her death, Army officials publicly mourned Sergeant Gita's loss. "I am deeply saddened by the loss of Sergeant Esther Gita, a valued member of our 1st Medical Brigade family," said Colonel Werner Barden, her brigade commander. "Sergeant Gita was an exceptional soldier who will be missed by all who knew her. Her brigade pledged support to her loved ones and the children she left behind." Meanwhile, both Killeen PD and Army CID began trying to piece together what exactly led to the shooting. So far, Mwangi hasn't made any public statements, and no official motive has been released. neighbors told reporters that they heard shouting from the house that very night of the shooting, which suggested some form of domestic argument turned deadly. Court records confirmed Mwangi has been charged with first-degree murder. His case will move through the civilian court system, though the military may also pursue charges either from the civilians or maybe separately. All right, True Crime Army, thank you so much for joining me for this Headlines episode. You better believe that I will be following up with all of these cases as they kind of, close out. And I just want to say thank you so much for your continued case recommendations and for always keeping me in the loop with these cases. If you don't already follow me on Instagram, that is probably the best social media platform that you can follow me on. Instagram, and my handle is Military Murder Podcast. It's on Instagram where people often will message me or they'll DM me current cases that are in the news, and I will take from those when I am preparing these headline episodes. So again, be sure that you're following me on Instagram. I post all the time. I don't necessarily post new cases all the time, but I do post in my stories, and I'm highly active there. All right, everyone. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. This segment was made possible by all of you. Thank you so much. The theme music was created by Ty-Ops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder headline story very, very soon.
I was working on our podcast.